Have you ever been totally sure you recognize someone, across a crowded room, and then, nope, total stranger?
Happens all the time.
Or maybe you meet someone once, briefly, and then later, poof, their face is just gone from your memory.
Yeah, it's funny. Our brains are incredible face recognizing machines most of the time. But there's this really well documented bias that affects this ability pretty significantly.
Right. And that's what we're diving into today, isn't it? This thing called the cross-race effect.
Exactly. Sometimes it's called the own race bias.
Right.
And basically, it's the finding that people are just generally more accurate at recognizing faces of their own race compared to faces of another race.
And this isn't just some, academic curiosity.
Yeah.
It has huge real-world consequences. You mentioned the criminal justice system.
Oh, absolutely. It's quite sobering, actually. Eyewitness misidentification is a massive factor in wrongful convictions in the U.S.
How big a factor?
Well, according to groups like the Innocence Project and researchers like Bornstein, it contributes to over a third of wrongful convictions. That's more than all the other causes put together.
Wow. And jurors really rely on eyewitnesses, don't they?
They do, heavily. So understanding this effect, this bias, it's critical.
Okay, so our mission today is to really get under the hood of this cross-race effect, or CRE. We're going to look at where it might come from, the different ideas about why it happens.
Its impact in the real world, obviously, and also some really fascinating newer research about whether it can change, maybe even be reduced. We've got a good stack of research to draw on.
Great. So you said it's a robust effect. Just how strong is it? Is it like a tiny difference or something really noticeable?
Oh, it's definitely noticeable and incredibly consistent. There was a big meta-analysis. Meisner and Brigham did it back in 2001. They looked at 30 years of research.
Wow.
Yeah, hundreds of studies. And they found it's a statistically solid, reliable effect.
Yeah.
People across the board are just better with own race faces than cross-race faces. It's almost like a default setting in our face processing.
Okay, so if it's that consistent, where do scientists think it actually originates? What are the sort of main explanations?
Well, one of the big early ideas comes from what are called perceptual expertise models.
Expertise.
Yeah.
Like being an expert in faces.
Kinda, yeah. The basic idea, sometimes called the tuning hypothesis, is that our brains get fine-tuned by the faces we see the most. So if you mostly see faces of your own race...
You get really good at noticing the little differences between them.
Exactly. Your perceptual system becomes highly specialized for those faces. It's like developing expertise in anything, bird watching, car models, whatever.
Yeah.
You get better at distinguishing things you see often.
That makes a lot of sense. And there's evidence for this happening really early on, right? Even in babies.
Yeah, that's some of the compelling evidence. Studies show that even tiny infants, like 3 months old, already prefer looking at own race faces.
3 months.
I know. And the effect is clearly there in young kids, say 6 to 14 years old. But maybe the most striking evidence is from studies of cross-race adoption.
How does that work?
Well, they looked at Korean children who were adopted and raised entirely by European families, and guess what?
They got better at European faces.
They showed a recognition advantage for European faces. The usual CRE was completely reversed.
Whoa, so that really points to experience, not just genetics or something innate.
Precisely. It strongly suggests that the environment, the faces you grow up seeing, shapes this ability.
So this expertise idea, does it mean we actually process faces differently depending on whether they're own race or cross-race, like a different mental strategy?
That's the next layer, exactly. The hypothesis is that this difference in expertise leads to qualitatively different ways of processing. For own race faces, we tend to use what's called configural processing.
Configural, what does that mean?
It means looking at the whole configuration, the spacing between the eyes, the distance from nose to mouth, all those spatial relationships. Treating the face as one integrated unit.
Ah, like taking it all in at once.
Right. And that's super effective for telling individuals apart.
Okay. And for cross-race faces, where we have less expertise?
The idea is we fall back on a more piecemeal or feature-based approach, focusing on individual features, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, but maybe not integrating them as effectively.
Like looking at the parts instead of the whole.
Sort of, yeah. And experiments back this up. They do things like mess with the face configuration, misaligning the top and bottom halves, for example.
The composite face task.
That's the one. Or the part-whole task, where you have to recognize a feature alone versus in the context of the whole face. These manipulations tend to disrupt our recognition of own race faces much more because we rely so heavily on that configural information.
Okay, so it's about the processing style. I've also heard about this concept of face space. How does that fit in?
Ugh, face space models. Yeah, imagine like a mental map, a multidimensional space where every face you know is plotted as a point.
Okay.
Because you have so much experience with own race faces, those points are really spread out, distinct from each other. Lots of room between them on the map. Makes it easy to pinpoint an individual.
Got it. Clear distinctions.
But cross-race faces, if you have less experience, they tend to cluster together more densely in one area of this face space.
Making them harder to tell apart.
Exactly. They're all kind of huddled together, metaphorically speaking, which also helps explain why people sometimes have higher false alarm rates for cross-race faces, thinking you've seen someone before when you haven't, because they fall into that dense cluster.
So more exposure could, theoretically, spread those cross-race faces out in our mental map.
That's the idea. And studies looking at, say, interracial contact generally support this more meaningful contact, tends to improve cross-race recognition somewhat. Perceptual training can also help if it focuses on the right dimensions.
Okay, this perceptual expertise angle seems pretty strong, lots of evidence. But you hinted earlier, it might not be the complete picture. Are there things it struggles to explain?
Yeah, it's a really important foundation, but there are some, let's say, inconsistencies or gaps. For one thing, the effects of perceptual training, while they can happen, sometimes they appear surprisingly quickly, but then they can also disappear just as fast.
Which doesn't sound like typical deep-seated expertise development.
Right. Expertise usually takes time and effort to build and tends to be more durable. Also, some studies haven't found a super clear direct link between how much someone shows configural processing differences and the actual size of their cross-race effect.
So the correlation isn't always perfect.
Exactly, which suggests maybe there's something else going on besides just the perceptual mechanics.
Okay, so if it's not purely about how our eyes and brain process the visual info, what else could be contributing?
This is where social cognition theories really come into play. The core idea here shifts the focus a bit. It suggests we tend to think about members of our in-group as individuals.
The unique people.
Right. But we tend to think about members of outgroups more in terms of their category membership. Like, oh, that's one of them.
So it's less about the face itself and more about how we mentally categorize the person.
In a way, yes. The CRE, from this viewpoint, is seen as a perceptual outcome of these broader social cognitive habits. It's not just race, but this fundamental in-group versus out-group processing difference.
That's a powerful idea, our social thinking affecting basic perception.
Yeah.
What are some specific models here? You mentioned a future selection model.
Yeah, Levin's model. It suggests that for outgroup faces, cross-race faces in this context, the category itself, like race, becomes a really salient cue, a feature-positive cue. Meaning we might unconsciously focus on the features that define the category skin tone, maybe hair texture, because that helps us quickly classify the person.
But maybe at the cost of noticing the little things that make them unique.
Precisely. You get quick categorization, but poorer individual recognition because you haven't encoded those individuating details as strongly. Visual search tasks provide some support. People are often faster to spot a single cross-race face in a group of own race faces, possibly because that category feature just pops out.
Interesting. Are there other ideas about how our attention or motivation plays a role?
Yes, definitely. There's Rodin's cognitive disregard model. It's a bit different. It suggests that we might simply pay less attention, allocate fewer cognitive resources to processing individuals we perceive as less socially relevant to us.
Like outgroup members.
Often, yes. It's not necessarily a conscious dismissal, but more of a subtle, maybe automatic lack of motivation to really individuate them during encoding.
So we just don't put in the same mental effort.
That's the idea. And Rodin showed this isn't just about race. Think about the cross-age effect. Younger adults are better with younger faces, older adults with older faces.
So it extends to other group boundaries.
Exactly. University affiliation, socioeconomic status. Studies find we tend to be better at recognizing faces from groups we identify with, potentially because we're more motivated to process them deeply. Less motivation means shallower processing.
Okay, so we have perceptual expertise, and now these social cognitive factors like categorization and motivation. Is there a way to bring these together?
Yes, and that's what the dual process model, proposed by Meisner and others, tries to do. It integrates aspects of both.
How so?
It suggests we use different memory processes. For own race faces, we're more likely to use effortful, recollection-based retrieval. This involves remembering specific details about when and where you saw the face, the context. It's a rich, detailed memory.
Okay.
For cross-race faces, the idea is we rely more on a general feeling of familiarity, like that face seems familiar, but without the specific contextual details.
Which could explain the higher false alarms. It feels familiar, but you don't have this solid recollection to confirm it.
Exactly. Studies using the remember no guess paradigm support this. People report far more rich remember experiences for own race faces, suggesting deeper encoding and retrieval compared to more know or familiarity-based responses for cross-race faces.
This brings us back squarely to the real-world impact, especially in law. If cross-race IDs often rely on this weaker sense of familiarity, that's worrying for eyewitness testimony.
It's deeply worrying, given how much weight eyewitness accounts carry in court and knowing they're more prone to error, particularly in cross-race situations. It's a major issue for justice.
So what have attempts to fix this in applied settings shown? Can you just, warn people about the CRE and tell them to be more careful?
You'd hope so, but the research there is, well, a bit disappointing. Bornstein and colleagues did studies on this. They tried instructing people to be extra careful with other race faces.
Did it work?
Didn't eliminate the accuracy difference. They also tried making people feel accountable for their choices.
Same result.
Same result. No significant reduction in the core CRE accuracy gap.
Wow. What about explicitly telling them about the cross-race effect beforehand? Like, hey, this bias exists, be aware.
Even that wasn't enough to get rid of the actual accuracy difference between recognizing own race and cross-race faces. What it did do, interestingly, was make people more cautious overall.
How so?
They became more conservative in their responses, less likely to pick someone, which meant fewer false alarms. So it didn't fix the underlying recognition problem, but it did encourage a decision-making style that might at least reduce mistaken IDs, which is something, but not a complete solution.
Right. It reduces one kind of error, but the fundamental difficulty remains. What about the lineups themselves? Does the CRE affect how they're even put together?
Oh, absolutely. This is another critical layer. Research has found that police or consultants helping them might inadvertently create biased lineups, especially across race.
Like using fillers that aren't very similar?
Sometimes, yeah. Or using fewer distinct photos for, say, black lineups compared to white lineups. Even reusing the same filler photos across different lineups for different suspects. It suggests maybe an own race bias in judging facial similarity itself.
So people constructing the lineup might have their own CRE influencing their choices.
Exactly. There are studies where participants had to build lineups. And for instance, black participants put more effort into making fair black lineups than white participants did when making black lineups. It really highlights that judging similarity is subjective and influenced by our own experiences and biases.
Which means a police officer or a judge from a different background might not even see that a lineup is biased against a suspect from another group.
Precisely. The recommendation that comes out of this research is pretty clear. You need input from people who share the suspect's background to ensure the fillers are genuinely similar and the lineup is fair. Similarity is truly in the eye of the beholder here.
And this goes beyond just faces, right? You mentioned interpreting behavior, too.
Yeah, it extends to things like deception detection. Some research, Vrij and Winkle, for example, suggests that nonverbal cues sometimes associated with lying in, say, white populations like gaze aversion or fidgeting might just be more common baseline behaviors in individuals from other ethnic groups.
So someone could appear suspicious just because their normal behavior differs from the observer's cultural norms.
Exactly, even if they're telling the truth. And it applies to verbal styles, too. Differences in vocabulary or how a story is told can impact perceived credibility. It really complicates things like evaluating witness statements fairly.
Okay, so we've covered perceptual factors, social cognitive factors, the real-world messiness. Where does this leave the overall understanding? Are these competing ideas, or are they coming together?
The trend is definitely towards integration. Most researchers now see it less as perceptual versus social cognitive, and more as a complex interplay between them. They're complementary frameworks.
So both matter. Experience tunes our perception, and social categories shape our attention and motivation.
That seems to be the consensus. The CRE is multifaceted. And a key point emerging from this is that just being around people from other groups isn't necessarily enough to overcome the effect.
Right, you mentioned that earlier. It's not just contact, it's the quality of contact.
Precisely. It requires attentive, effortful encoding, really focusing on the individual. Studies have shown this quite elegantly.
Like the Bob study.
Yeah, Tanaka and Pierce's work. If you train people to individuate cross-race faces, learn their names, focus on their unique features, like this is Bob, the CRE can actually be eliminated in that context.
But if you train them just to categorize.
Like this person is black, this person is white. Even with the same amount of exposure to the faces, the CRE remains. It really highlights that it's about engaging with the person, not just the category.
That leads to some really fascinating recent work on how flexible this effect might be. Can the social context actually change how we see even our own group members?
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting. Shriver and colleagues did this study. They showed white participants, white faces, but presented on backgrounds that implied poverty, sort of a white trash stereotype cue.
Yeah.
And amazingly, the participants recognized those white faces, the ones marked as a kind of social outgroup, just as poorly as they recognized black faces.
Whoa! So perceiving someone as outgroup based on class trumped the usual own race advantage.
It seemed to, yeah. And critically, that background manipulation had no effect on how well they recognized the black faces. It only degraded the recognition of the supposedly in-group faces when they were associated with that negative social cue.
That's wild. It really underscores that in-group isn't just about race. And what about priming different identities? Can that shift the CRE?
This is probably some of the most groundbreaking recent stuff. Marsh and colleagues worked with bicultural individuals like Latino Americans who identify strongly with both Latino and American cultures.
Yeah.
When they subtly primed the participants to think about their Latino identity, they showed the standard CRE, better recognition for Latino faces than white faces.
Makes sense.
But, and this is the kicker, when they primed the same people to focus on their American identity, the effect reversed. They became better at recognizing white faces than Latino faces.
They flipped the switch just by changing the salient identity.
Effectively, yes. It suggests the CRE isn't totally fixed, but can be dynamically influenced by which social identity is currently active in our minds. It seems to be about how we're categorizing people in the moment.
Mind-blowing. So our internal frame really shapes this fundamental perceptual ability.
Right.
What about when people belong to multiple groups? Race, university, politics? Does one outgroup label always win?
That's complex. Research on cross-categorization is mixed. Sometimes any salient outgroup cue seems to diminish recognition, even if you share another in-group identity. But other times, if a shared in-group identity is made really prominent, it can sometimes overcome the outgroup effect. It's messy, like real social life.
And these principles, they don't just apply to who we recognize, but maybe how we interpret them too, like emotions.
Absolutely. There's a parallel effect in emotion recognition. People are generally better, faster, and more accurate at reading the emotions on faces from their own cultural in-group.
Even for basic emotion.
Even for basic emotions. And remarkably, this in-group advantage for reading emotions has even been shown in minimal groups. Groups created totally arbitrarily in the lab based on, like, a coin toss.
Wow. So just feeling like someone is one of us makes us better at reading their face.
It seems to enhance that processing, yeah. It shows how deep these in-group, out-group distinctions run in our perception.
Okay, this has been an incredibly deep dive. We've gone from basic perception to social identity, justice, emotion. What's the big takeaway for listeners trying to wrap their heads around this, and where does the research go next?
I think the biggest takeaway is this fascinating tension. The cross-race effect is a real, robust phenomenon rooted in both experience and social categorization. But, crucially, it's not necessarily fixed. The recent research showing its flexibility based on context and identity priming is really exciting.
Suggesting there's potential for change, maybe.
Potentially, yes. Though simple instructions aren't enough. As for where research goes next, there's a huge call for more ecologically valid studies. Moving beyond the lab, using proper target-present and target-absent lineups, like in real cases.
Getting closer to real-world conditions.
Exactly. And things like actually videotaping identification procedures in police stations. That could give us invaluable insight into how witnesses actually make decisions, how confident they are, and maybe help develop better procedures to protect against misidentification.
So we've seen how this complex mix of experience, social grouping, and even subtle cues shape something as basic as recognizing a face. The implications are huge everyday interactions, but also the profound consequences in the justice system. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? If our idea of who's in and who's out can literally change how we remember someone's face, what other ways are our social context invisibly shaping how we see and remember the world and the people in it? And maybe what small shifts in our own focus, perhaps towards individuation rather than categorization, could make a real difference.